It's a Donald Trump administration, which means that ideological consistency is not the currency of the moment. Loyalty is the currency of the moment, right? A couple of interesting things about the group of people that he has chosen so far. First of all, we saw none of them in the first term. Second, in the first term, Donald Trump was looking for people who looked like they fit the part. They looked like establishment figures. Rex Tillerson, the former chief executive of ExxonMobil. Jim Mattis, incredibly well-respected former combatant commander, 4-star, comes back out of retirement and so forth. What did Trump discover? That they were a restraint on him doing whatever he wanted to go do, right? And every one of them had something in common. They all got fired, okay? And the first thing he did here was not appoint some people, it was announce who he would never appoint.
Mike Pompeo?
Mike Pompeo, his former
yeah.
Secretary of State, who said, it might not be a good idea to blow up the Iran deal, right? Or Nikki Haley, who ran against him, the completely unforgivable step. So what do we have now? Initially, some very conventional choices. Marco Rubio, you may like his politics, you may not like his politics. He's been in the Senate for 14 years. He has been the vice chair of the Intelligence Committee. He is not an out-of-boundary choice for Secretary of State.
You could imagine him Secretary of State under a Mitt Romney administration.
You could imagine him a Secretary of State in a George W. Bush administration.
Absolutely.
But it was a slightly different Marco Rubio. It was a neocon Marco Rubio back then, who was tough on Russia. He has shifted in recent times, as has Mike Waltz, the newly appointed National Security Advisor. Only in the past few months, as it became clear they were up for positions in the new administration, did they begin to shave back to America first, which was to say, we're not going to support the Ukrainians. We're not going to give them another $95 billion. They both found reasons to vote against that Ukraine package. So what does this tell you? At first, when we heard about Waltz and Rubio, we thought, okay, Trump's roughly replicating his first term. Then came the next wave, the revenge nominees, okay? That is Matt Gaetz as Attorney General, a man who's was under investigation by the Justice Department that he would be leading as Attorney General, was under investigation by the House Ethics Committee for, among other things, the possibility of drug use and trafficking in minors. That investigation is now being buried away because he quit his House post just a few days ago. We saw Tulsi Gabbard for Director of National Intelligence, somebody who took an unexplained trip to Syria to try to work with the Syrian dictator, Bashar Assad, somebody who has frequently spouted Russian talking points during the course of the war, blamed the United States at one point for building a biological weapons lab in Ukraine. There's no evidence they ever did that. This person would be sitting atop...
She sort of recanted that eventually.
She did eventually, but she would be sitting atop the structure of 70,000 intelligence professionals across 16 or 17 different agencies and preparing the presidential daily brief of what President Trump sees each day, something for which he's had no training and no experience. None of these folks have been vetted in the normal way.
And indeed won't be vetted in the normal way because the FBI is not being allowed by Trump, President-elect Trump, to come in and vet them.
Presumably because he's afraid of what it was they will say, or they'll come back and say, we would not recommend this person for security clearance.
Now, the Trump people would say it's because the FBI has become a politicized institution, is itself not trusted, and needs redress and reform. I mean, this is part of the issue, right, is that the institutions themselves in the United States have become the object of politics. Not the policies, but the institutions. Is that correct to say?
It is not only correct to say that, Ian. Beyond that, what we have seen is people being put on top of these institutions with the explicit assumption that they're there to go disassemble those institutions from their current state, which is exactly what the supporters of President Trump were looking for. He was explicit about this. If you voted for Donald Trump in the 2024 election, it was probably with a thought that these institutions need to be blown up.
One place we see a lot of ideological alignment from the Trump appointees is, of course, on Israel. This has to be the strongest, most pro-Israel constellation of leaders, and in some ways the most overtly anti-Palestinian constellation of leaders that a U.S. administration has ever seen. I'm thinking, not just of the top cabinet officials, but also Elise Stefanik for UN, Mike Huckabee for ambassador.
So let's look at those two, Ian. First of all, he appointed his UN ambassador and his Israel ambassador before he appointed a Secretary of State, which tells you he wasn't really terribly interested in what his future Secretary of State thought about these ambassadors.
Who will appoint, who will report.
Nominally, at least, would report to the Secretary of State. That tells you that Donald Trump wanted to send the message, these two ambassadors report straight to me. Second, in Mike Huckabee, he picked somebody from the evangelical side of the Republican Party who has said in the past that the Palestinians don't really exist as a people, that the West Bank isn't really a separate territory.
It's Israeli.
It is just part of Israel. And so he's laid his cards out pretty well on the table. The question is, does this so poison the chances that the United States could act as something of an intermediary between the Palestinians and the Israelis, which has been the sort of traditional role? Or is he saying with this, we are so far in the camp with the current Israeli government that we're not going to pretend to go do that. We're going to get a peace deal here by doing it directly with Netanyahu.
Yeah, I think Trump's position would be, look, we created a two-state solution as part of the Abraham Accords last time around, take it or leave it. Palestinians refused to take it. And so now we no longer support a two-state solution.
Well, I'm not sure that Donald Trump was ever a real full supporter of the two-state solution. In the first term, there was a famous moment where he said, 2 states, 1 state, kind of whatever works. I mean, who doesn't make that big a difference? Well, it makes a big difference. And I think if you're the Palestinians, you're going to sort of think to yourself, you may be forced into a deal here because both Hamas and Hezbollah have been left in such terrible shape. I think the real crunch with Netanyahu, though, doesn't come over Gaza. Doesn't come over Lebanon.
It's Iran.
It's Iran. It's the big element here. I don't think that Donald Trump wants to get into a direct conflict with Iran. He pulled back from many opportunities to do so in his first term.